an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood, the Immortal Legion. In this episode, well, it's called the Immortal Legion for a reason. They are unleashed, and frankly, everything that I expected from these things isn't what I'm getting, and it's just more upsetting than I could have imagined. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Max, if you're out there, hello and thank you. This episode begins with these creatures being let out. And I really thought, guys, I said last episode how the scream they let out was so scary and not what I was prepared for at all. And you really would have thought, if you were an intelligent, logical person, not like myself, that this would point to the fact that the soldiers in general probably are not going to be what I'm expecting. I didn't think of that. I was just like, oh, word? That's a surprise. I didn't think they would make that kind of sound, and left it, thinking that the surprises are just going to end with the sound being the thing that I wasn't expecting. No, of course not. Of course not. So we get this dude, and again, these guys had said like, oh, we haven't gotten a chance to finish the infusion, and we don't know if it's going to be okay. We haven't tested it. And when they woke up at the end of the last episode, they were still hanging upside down, and they let out that scream while they were still hanging. And I really thought that they would be righted, they would be put on their feet and set down, and they just get let go off of the system to drop onto their heads. And I have to put a caveat for everything that I say here that I thought was really interesting, because I don't know exactly how much of this is the way it was supposed to function, and how much of this is supposed to be a result of them being released before they're ready. But I have to assume that they weren't just going to be like completely untethered and dropped on their heads. And that would be like, and I say that because I'm thinking these are a resource, and you wouldn't just have your resource immediately risk injury upon their first step. But they are extremely resilient, like unkillable beings. So maybe that wouldn't be a priority. You wouldn't care, because they aren't going to have the same kinds of damage that a regular human body would have from that fall. I think what upsets me so much about it is that it feels like they're being treated as such objects, and they are. But it's just hard for me to imagine, and I think a lot of you can probably understand this. You manage to assign like a personality or some kind of identity even to objects. A lot of us do this. I was watching a TikTok the other day about a woman who uses all of her mugs in a very carefully coordinated rotation because she doesn't want the mugs to feel bad about not getting used. So this is what I mean, like having that attitude of, I am going to let these things drop onto their heads, indicates that you don't even really see them as a person would see an actual object most of the time. It's even worse than that somehow. Because, like, I winced when these things were dropped, you know? And I wince when people, like, do stuff to, like, weird dolls, whatever. You put something into that. And this, for me, the way that all of this shakes out, I am dying to know how much of this was part of Father's plan and how much of this is this dude getting what he fucking gets because he decided to take it upon himself to loose these things that are not yet prepared to do the thing that they were supposed to. Are they supposed to do what they do next? Because they get dropped and eventually they stand up and they're all like groaning, and the lines of red on their faces, the tattoos that I had thought indicated where their eyes would be, they run down from either side of the eyeball, the single eyeball in their forehead, in such a way as to make it look like the eyeballs are bleeding. And no matter how many times I saw these things, my brain interpreted it as their eyes are bleeding every time I saw them. It was just like this weird... The style is clearly done very purposefully and consciously to evoke that reaction, I think. But I really thought I'd kind of get used to it and it wouldn't have that effect on me anymore. And I was just super wrong. It never gets better. I just feel repulsed by them, even though they have, in some ways, a really angular, like, the design of their body and their makeup, for lack of a better pattern, I suppose you could say. It all feels computerized. Like the way that the angle of these markings go reminds me of the transmission on like a chip, a microchip, you know? But they have such organic behavior. And the conflict of those two things is really fucking unnerving. So they drop and they begin to stand, but they're groaning and moaning and saying like it hurts. Which, right there, you already have creeped me right the fuck out. Him saying it hurts implies an amount of consciousness and awareness that I don't want these things to have. Because if they have that, then this is already so cruel. And then it's even crueler. Why give them the ability to feel pain if you're going to do this to them? So I'm assuming that either they weren't given the ability and this is a leftover based on a poor construction or, you know, early release, or it's a voice saying it hurts as a sort of echo of something that happened when this soul was still alive. Either way. Ew. Oh, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So they continue forward and they are approaching this dude who has, for reasons I cannot understand, no qualms whatsoever about this thing coming at him by itself, separate from the rest, in a way that seems to me distinctly threatening. He says Papa, first of all, and he, like the little soldier guy does, the dummy is what they're called. And the guy says, yes, I am your father, son. I want you to listen closely. And when he says, I am your father, all of them had previously, up to this point, been sort of like hunched over in a way like that there's no support or purpose to it. They're like standing, but only just. And their arms are kind of dangling and their spines are curved. And when he says, I am your father, they straighten and zero in on him in a way that, for me, that was the thing that I was like, how are you just standing there watching this dude? Did you not see the pinpoint alertness? And I think he just thinks that it's them reporting for duty, looking up like, oh, you're here. I'm ready to accept orders, sir. But to me, the motion felt very much like a group of predators suddenly all zeroing in on a prey that's like just standing there. So it comes at him. And there's this moment when he's saying, I am your father, son, and now I want you to listen closely. There are many renegade elements, and they want to take us over. And as he's saying this, it says Papa again, and he says, you have a job to do. And it lunges at him and bites his throat and takes him to the ground. And then several more join it, and then the rest. Do you guys know how utterly shocked I was with this? I had plenty of ideas as to what these things were going to do. Straight up eating the man. Eating him. They're not just biting. They are eating. This is a feast. This is a group of fucking coyotes or something. Nothing about this feels like it's just about mindless revenge, or it feels like they are hungry. Nothing like this ever entered my head. Again, it's too organic. It makes them into a kind of an animal. And I'm like, either you're a person or you're a robot. Those are our two options. And you guys clearly aren't people anymore. So now you're robots. But they're not really. There's something else. And I don't like it. And one of them looks up and like licks his lips that are all bloody with the largest tongue you have ever seen. That tongue is the size of like a human liver. And the excitement of all of them feasting on this thing. There's the one scientist who is still sort of like hanging back and terrified, doesn't know what to do. And he begins firing his gun because, again, they all notice him at once and all of their heads come up in a very upsetting sort of movement. And he realizes it's time. So he says, oh, fuck this, pulls his gun and shoots a bunch of them. And they keep saying that it hurts and keep coming at him. And this man doesn't even try to run, which genuinely surprised me. I was like waiting for him to at least attempt to flee. But he's sort of acting like this room's door is closed and there's nowhere for him to go, which I didn't think was really the case. And I'm like, you're not even going to make a try for it, sir? But we see in the reflection of his glasses, one of them coming towards him with its mouth open. And we cut from there. And the guy is like, definitely he has been eaten. This guy is dead. But we don't go... I'm just really wanting to see how everybody reacts to this. I want to see what the homunculi do, because what Envy does feels like that just happened to work out really well for Envy. I don't think that was planned. I don't feel like any of this seems like the plan. And thus, I want to know what the plan was supposed to be. So, we go back to Ed and Scar and the Chimera, and they're up against this huge door, and the remains of Barry the Chopper are still down here. And Ed is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the place. He was one of the guardians of the fifth laboratory. And he goes to the doors and tries to shove them open. And nothing happens. It's honestly really funny because he presses his hand against the doors in a sort of soft, like, contemplative way, as if he hoped they would just slide open upon the touch of his hand. And then he begins to push a little harder, and nothing happens. And he finally just, like, yanks it, and no budging, nothing. Scar comes forward, and he's sort of flexing his hand like he's about to do some alchemy. And they're like, okay, we'll try that. They look up, and the doors just begin to open by themselves. And Ed looks up and is like, oh, sweet. And then all of these fucking dummies come running out. And I was not ready for the fact that they were right there. I kind of thought it was going to be a little bit more of a journey before they reached anybody that we know about. But what happens is that they try to lock as many of them into the room with them as they can, which is honestly extremely brave because there are a lot of these things. I'm not sure they are aware when they close that door just how many there are, and I'm wondering if they are going to begin to regret this decision. So this is when we cut to General Armstrong, who is holding this dude hostage. Tell the Briggs men to pull back. And she's walking this dude forward, and all of these men pull their guns, and she says, you're going to shoot? Really? And she shoves the guy's sword into his own foot, which truly, I don't really know what this accomplishes, because the whole thing is supposed to be, you're not going to shoot me because I've got him. And if you are about to shoot me because you think I might kill this guy anyway, I'm just going to harm him and make it more likely that I intend to kill him anyway. Or maybe it's supposed to be like, you were supposed to not harm, I'm supposed to not harm him in exchange for you not drawing your weapons, and you drew them. So the deal is I harm him in response, I guess is I'm not like, she didn't really set down any terms to those dudes exactly. And I guess she's just assuming that they're kind of doing a quid pro quo here. Because she calls them lacking in discipline. So I have to assume. And she tells him, pull your forces back now. My Briggs men will not hesitate to wipe them out. And you don't want to lose all of your troops now, do you? And this dude is bleeding from several places at this point. And very, very angry. He's got that look on his face where it's a combination of rage and humiliation. And he tells his guys, don't let them in. Seal every gate. Watch out for them. And Armstrong is like, I really didn't think that you were going to do something foolish, but I kind of underestimated how much of a backbone you have. And I can't say that I'm unimpressed. Like, there's a sense of almost begrudging respect that she's finally seeing somebody stand up for anything. And I can understand that, honestly. So she's saying this, and there's this huge shadow behind her. And she jumps out of the way just as Sloth comes forward. And reminder, Sloth is like 11 feet tall. This guy is huge. She jumps out of the way, and this guy slams his hand straight down and crushes the man into pulp, actual pulp. He lifts his hand, and he just has blood all over it, and he says, "Oh dear, I made a mess." And he's genuinely like, oh, I made a mess. Like, if you wrote this for a villain, it would be, oh my, I seem to have made a mess. It would be like, oh, a little bit, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. But Sloth is genuinely like, oh dear. Oh, now I got to clean this up. And that response, for some reason, also made me upset. He's just so out of touch with what he's doing, the consequences of any of this, And he's like, I was told to keep you from interfering, so I am here to kill you, which is honestly a really big pain in the ass. And Armstrong is like, thank you for not making me kill this guy, because this sword is a family heirloom. But as we see later, she jumps into this with a real sense of, I'm going to get you, and that is not how it goes. So then we go back into the basement, and we've got all of our guys fighting these various dummies, and they are really managing to fight the good fight, but it's not actually having the effect that they are hoping for. Scar grabs one of them by the head and zaps it with his alchemy, and it basically just gets like a green mark on its head, and then its eye rolls back to him, and it doesn't even fall. It shakes, but it seems to be otherwise unaffected. So this dude being green, I have questions about this. Is this meant to be a result of the alchemy's like chemical reaction with what these things are made out of? Because we know that they're filled with a fluid that is actually red. Like, the fluid they're filled with looks like blood. And I'm not really sure what the green is about, because it looks like it's supposed to be the thing's blood for a minute. But when I actually look at it when it's close to the camera, there's a sort of like animation style to it that almost gives the effect of the green looking like grass, like fluffy somehow. And I was like, I don't know what happened here. Obviously, whatever it is that Scar was trying to do, it didn't work. And the thing is, like, not coming right back at him to continue fighting. It's not completely unaffected, but it's just not doing what they want, which is to drop these things and keep them from, like... So anyway, Ed is circled up with the Chimera, and they are all sort of excited about this fight. They are all feeling like they finally get to stretch their legs, that the fact that they are Chimera has to be kept under wraps so often that it's downright exciting to have this moment where they get to let loose completely. And Ed finally has a moment when he's standing there of one of them saying Big Brother. Now, I don't know, because I thought for a second that this was implying that it was Ed. Or not Ed, Al. And I'm like, but Al is still okay, but we haven't seen him yet this episode. So I had a moment of thinking, wait, is this the hint that fucking something has happened to Al? And I got really nervous. It turns out that's not it. This creature saying Big Brother signals to Ed that all of them are made using human souls. But I don't understand why it said Big Brother to him, or like if it's supposed to be somebody who recognizes him from something else. I was genuinely not understanding this. So the camera pulls back and we see how many more of them are just coming out of these doors. And Scar is like, yo, if these things escape, this will be really bad. And they're circling them up and have them in this loop that looks like they're going to be completely trapped. And then Ed just closes the door, which ensures that they are trapped. And I was like, oh, I mean, I guess if you want that to be what's happening on purpose. Okay. Let's see. Damien says, I suspect she was testing him since a pencil pusher like this guy would crack and tell them to back off. Oh, testing him. I see. B. Moore says, recall the senior staff have all been promised immortal bodies, so it does take some kind of spine to be willing to give the order that will get you killed literal hours before you expected to be given eternal life. I just can't... eternal life. Like, I just don't... And why? These guys are about to murder everybody they know. Other than like a couple of the higher up guys who I assume they don't like very much. Like, what are you even living for? You suck. Beanware says, Big Brother is a common way to refer to older boys by younger kids in Japan. It was supposed to make Ed think about Nina, the girl whose father merged her with her dog. Oh, you know, her name occurred to me. And then I was like, but that was a chimera situation, and she was killed while they were in that form, so she wouldn't be here. And also, I couldn't remember her calling Edward Big Brother, but she may have. Did she? I may have just forgotten that. But so it did call that to mind, but I didn't make the connection that they were wanting me to make, I guess, because I thought that this was meant to be like a specific person and not just overall being some kind of hint to him. So we go to the town outside. We see Ed and his gang get all completely circled up by these things. And when we go outside, everybody in the street is like, something big is going on here. We can see that a lot of them are sensing strange happenings afoot. Even the baby is crying, as if the sort of energy that's been unleashed here is perceptible to it somehow. And I thought that was kind of interesting. There's a suggestion that the vibe is just in the air. And maybe the way that this kid can sense it is linked to the type of change that the Shinjis, I hope I'm saying that right, their version of alchemy is like linked to something different than the alchemy in this country. And maybe that's more natural in how it's supposed to be. And so the baby is sort of operating with that same perception type. I don't know if I'm reading into that too much, but I just thought it was interesting that the baby seems to be affected. It felt like it was done very specifically. So anyway, now we go back to our dudes, and they are just like, all right, we're about to fight these things, and we get to see the beginnings of them coming at them. And I really do like the slow-mo of them going head to head. I sort of wondered if Ed's realization that these things were made from the souls of people, I thought maybe Ed would feel like they couldn't just fight them outright the way they had been. I was wondering if he was going to say, like, we have to save them. We have to do something to corral them up somewhere, but we can't hurt them. And I'm personally glad that he doesn't do that, because I feel like it would have been kind of tiresome. And also, I am not entirely sure that they have, because what I want is like, well, if we want to free their souls, then if you kill them, maybe they'll actually die and their soul will be free properly. But they can't seem to actually die. So you can decide to go ahead and kick the shit out of them, and that isn't really going to harm them in a real way any more than they have been harmed. You know? So anyway, we see the armies, and they are cutting off all the entrances and exits. They are specifically looking for an ice cream truck because they know that that's the one that's got the arms in it. And as they're in the midst of this transition, we see Mr. Bear with a mohawk drop down onto the roof of the car behind him. And Hawkeye is like, that sounds like Buccaneer to me. And everybody is looking at Roy going, hey man, so we were supposed to just go back into town, and I don't think that is going to happen. What do you think we're going to do? And he says, so they're looking for an ice cream truck, huh? And we cut away again. This time, we go to Henkel. And Henkel is chilling outside of the Big Onion. And I was very surprised at how frustrated he was at just sitting here. But I thought it made a lot of sense. Especially a guy like him, a soldier. The fact that he is being left behind. I was sort of thinking he's so injured. You know, his arm is in a sling. He's got bandages around his head. I was like, yeah, you really should not be mixing it up right now, my friend. But nevertheless, he still wants to be out there. So he walks up to the Onion and he can hear that noise. And he says, hey, Alphonse, what's all that racket in there? I keep hearing it. It's been all day. And Al says, Salim's been playing with my head, which honestly, he kind of has. And Henkel thinks for a moment, well, I guess he is just a little kid. And then all of a sudden he stops and is like, wait a second. And he realizes what Salim is doing and that it's Morse code. And he yells, Alphonse, you have got to stop him from doing that. That's Morse code. He's signaling where we are. And it's far too late. By the time Alphonse realizes and turns around, Henkel straightens up and Kimberly is right behind him. You guys, I keep forgetting about this motherfucker. Straight up. Totally forgot about it. It keeps happening. Because his part in this is sort of weird. You know, he's like the rogue agent. And I guess it's that he wants an immortal body? Like the rest of the generals and whatnot do, and that's what's motivating him. I don't know, but I genuinely don't think about him at all until he's back on screen. And I find that surprising because he's a pretty compelling bad guy. So I guess it's just a symptom of how many other incredibly high stakes things are going on here that he manages to get sort of overshadowed in that way. But every time he turns up, my immediate sort of emotional reaction is like, ugh. And I don't want to have that feeling about him because he's fun. But I don't know. There's just something about him that it feels like he isn't being allowed to be as nuts as he should be. He is on such missions, and so he's being played, you know, like, and he doesn't seem to realize it. And I guess I just kind of want Kimberly to be like completely let off the leash. Otherwise, it feels like a very carefully controlled attack dog, which is a little bit less fun. Not a big deal, but I was just surprised at my own reaction to him. B. Morris says, Kimberly has a weird set of philosophies and motives. They do make sense if you get all the pieces together, but it's not really obvious and never gets spelled out that explicitly. Might be worth discussing when the series ends. Okay. Yeah, so, like, he turns up here and immediately goes to attack Henkel, and I thought Henkel might die. He is in pretty bad shape after this. But he isn't dead. I just genuinely, when we see them step on his glasses, it felt very much like that is us walking on his corpse. That felt like an overall larger symbol of what had happened to him as a character. So Salim steps out and is like, hey man, thank you so much for getting me. I'm really sorry to have been all this trouble. I promise not to let my guard down again. And he has a genuinely charming, bashful kid face. And I felt very resentful of the fact that I thought he was kind of adorable right here. I don't know. So this is when we go to Mei Chang. She is running down the hall under Central, being chased by all of these dummies. And she's yelling to Envy, "What is happening here? It seems like you tricked me." And Envy is saying, no, I didn't lie to you. Your search for immortality ends further inside. Keep going. And Envy is being like tossed around this jar as Mei is running. And then we see the most insane fight scene of this series. I swear to God. And this is what I'm talking about with her and the indecisiveness I feel coming from this show. This girl fights like she's 22. Look, I'm just going to screen share real quick. And so in case any of you have forgotten what that moment is like, but the fighting is so competent that her being sent away is like, it makes even less sense when I see this. So hold on a second. I'm just going to play this for you. And those of you who are here, if you aren't in the crowdcast, apologies, because this will not do anything for you. But it is this very sudden series of splits and backflips and somersaults. And like, it's wildly acrobatic. And just not having her on your team in the midst, why wouldn't you want her? She is extremely good. So one of these creatures, the dummies, grabs the jar from midair with its teeth, bites it until it breaks, and then swallows Envy. And at first, it's just like, oh, well, is Envy gone now? But no. Another eyeball appears, and all of a sudden, it leaps on another and consumes it. And they all meld together in this horrifying blend of what looks almost like a cloud of dust, but it's actually flesh. And there's even one further down the hallway that Envy like reaches out and grabs, and all of a sudden there is Envy completely remade, and it's the original form of Envy, all in green, the huge lizard-like thing. And then a face comes out of the center of its forehead, and Envy, the smaller bodied humanoid Envy, reforms, and it's like that form sucks the entirety of the giant lizard form Envy into it in a way that I actually thought was kind of dope. Like the absorption and then a sort of extrusion and then absorption again was a really neat effect that was like surprisingly smooth considering how horrific it all is. And I really hated this though, because Envy is so freaking scary. Pride is the scariest. Envy's just more upsetting to look at straight up. But yeah, Envy is just cheering about how they're back and have their body again. Thanks for getting me this far, little squirt. So kind of you. And Envy looks down at Mei, and we cut. again, and we do not know what has happened there. But I stand by the thing with May is weird, and I don't like it, and I feel like there had to have been a better way to do this. It's fine. It seems like it's pretty much over now. We shall see. So we go to one of the villages, and people are wondering why they're being circled by military and whether or not they're going to be evicted. And inside, we've got Yoki and Marco talking. And Marco is about to head back into town. He's like, we can't sit here and do nothing. And Yoki says, man, what if somebody figures out who you are? If you're taken prisoner, it's gonna fuck Alphonse right up. Do you get what I'm saying? We can't afford to move carelessly. And he does this in such a way that it feels a lot more like, I want you to not put me at risk. And I'm going to frame this as, won't that be so hard on this kid that we both like? But before Marco can kind of call him on his shit, because it feels to me like Marco can see that's not really what's happening, they get distracted by a plume of smoke that's coming up from the onion. And we go back to Pride and Kimberly, and Kimberly is like, I thought there was supposed to be another one here with you. Wasn't like Gluttony meant to have been your backup or something? And Pride's like, oh, yeah, no, I ate him. It's fine. We're all basically the same thing. So even if we eat each other, it's not really cannibalism because it's not like we're different. And Al, Pride just tosses Al's head behind him in the most disrespectful way. And Al grabs his head, puts it on, and sees Henkel, and tries to run and help him. And Pride grabs him around the ankles and drags on him and says, you're not going anywhere. And Al is like, you know what? Fuck you, dude. And he uses some of his alchemy to blast the area in a way that Pride takes to be a fight against him. Like, you really think that you can use alchemy to break me into pieces? Like, you know that doesn't work. I don't get you. And he pulls on Al's legs, and then all of a sudden, we see that the legs are all he has. What Al transmuted was his own body. It honestly, I had a bit of a gasp moment. I know this doesn't actually hurt him exactly, but it's still such a fucked up thing to do to himself. And I was like, oh my God, Al, no. We cut from here to the fight between Sloth and General Armstrong. She insists on using a gun, even though she knows that has no effect on him. And finally pulls her weapon, her sword, and is like, all right, I guess I am going to have to use this thing. All of a sudden, one of the dudes in the hall is like, drop your weapon. We're going to try you as the traitor you are. And she turns around and there's a bunch of guys kneeling and they've got sort of riot shields in front of them and rifles. And he says, ready, men? Aim and prepare to fire. She flies out of the way. And as she does, and this is something that happens really fast, Sloth comes at them. And I guess this dude thought that because they were on the side of the military and Sloth is on their side, that Sloth would never dare hurt them. But they were right in Sloth's path, and they did not consider at all. So these guys go flying through the air, and they give her a moment to grab a grenade and essentially pull the pin and chuck it at Sloth. There's a big pause here. All this smoke. And she's thinking to herself, I hope that did something. But it did not. Sloth comes up behind her and grabs her around the pillar that she's hiding behind and basically is crushing her up against it. And as she's getting slowly crushed to death, he is just saying, I got you and I'm not going to mess up again this time. There is a swinging fist that appears out of nowhere and it smashes Sloth's face in the way that you punch bread dough. His face is quite pushed in. And then we have Major Armstrong. Hello, sister. Are you all right? With this fucking posing and explosion behind him. You guys, I am not kidding. I rewound this twice. I watched it 3 times. The 3rd time I called Owen in and was like, hey, babe, you have to see this part. I want a sequence animated of myself with an entrance like of this type. I don't know. I would have to be very careful about what I chose, what kind of sparkles, what kinds of colors. All I know is I have to have it. It's so wonderful. And he remains with the like sparkles around him in like for the next 2 minutes. This very stylized entrance is long over, but he's still got sparkles like all around his head the whole time that he's talking. So anyway, the general is just like, I'm fine. Of course I'm fine. She's very resentful, I think, of the fact that he saved her. And she tells him, oh yeah, that's a homunculus. Because he's like, would you mind letting me know what the fuck that thing is? And he says, this is my specialty. Why don't you let me take a crack at it? I'll take this atrocity down. And I'm curious, when he says, this is my specialty, what does he mean by that? Because there's like, does he mean homunculi are his specialty? Does he mean big giant dudes like this are my specialty? Like, he has a vibe like he's going to bring something to the table that they haven't tried. And maybe it's just hand to hand. Maybe he really thinks, well, nobody is going to have tried hitting him as hard as I can hit him because they can't. So I'm going to do that and we'll see how that goes instead. And maybe that's all it is. But I had a moment of just kind of like, you seem really confident, man. And I'm not really sure what it is that you think you're doing that a bullet couldn't do. Because he seems to be like, oh, guns don't work. I will, though. Which is quite a statement. I mean, you know, the man is confident. We know that about him. So, Damien says, she said they needed artillery to take him out, and his specialty is artillery-like alchemy. Oh, is it? I guess I'm just thinking about him being the punchy man. But I forget about the thing that he can do, like the types of alchemy that he can do. It's artillery-like, though? I think that I haven't seen him fight enough. I don't really remember. We don't see, like, when he gets in fights, he doesn't, like, use his alchemy that much, it feels like. It's mostly about him and, like, his physicality. But maybe I'm just forgetting. But yeah, so Sloth is not excited about this. Sloth just says again, what a pain. And then we go to Alphonse, who is trying to grab Heinkel and drag him, even though his legs, he's having to like shove along on these stumps. And Heinkel is like, man, why don't you just leave me behind? You have got to save yourself. And Al is like, that is super duper not happening. I promised Ed that we weren't going to let anybody else needlessly die. And Henkel is like, Kimberly and Pride are out there, man. We are in no shape to face the two of them. Look at this. I can't walk. You don't have legs. And Al is saying, I swear I'll save you. And begins punching his legs for not doing what he wants them to do, saying, we can't be beaten now. I won't let it happen. And I was like, what are you punching yourself for? Is that doing anything? He's like acting like he can beat his own legs into submission. I mean, I guess if you just used alchemy to sever your legs, couldn't you use alchemy to change a piece of this so that it is a little bit more functional? I don't know. But anyway, Heinkel is very touched at the fact that Al is completely refusing to leave him behind. And is like, man, you are literally falling to pieces and you are still trying to help me out. I gotta hand it to y'all. You've got grit. I will say that. And Al says, I promised him, and I am not letting anybody else die no matter what. And we zero in on Henkel's mouth for a moment, just his mouth, in a way that I thought was going to be the moment he died, like the exhalation. And I was really surprised that instead he sort of seems to come back to himself and say, I guess you're right, because his mouth is just like open and he's breathing with it open. It's a very weird little moment. And I was fully thinking, oh, he's about to die. But no. He says, I guess you're right. Wasn't it Kimberly who said that the true test of winning was surviving? Which reminds me, I have something that might be useful. And he pulls out that Philosopher's Stone, which I had entirely forgotten that he had. And Al is like, what the fuck, man? Where did you get that? And he says, when Kimberly abandoned us in the mine, if we use this, we may actually have a chance of winning. And both of them have to take this moment and be aware and acknowledge the fact that these things are made using human lives. Ed has already said that he doesn't want to use one of these to get their bodies back because it's just like, there would be blood on his hands. And he's like, I get that. And I'm not even trying to say that that's the wrong call. That's your choice. However, Al, this thing could potentially be used to save the world. And I know that human beings were sacrificed and they're kind of locked inside this thing. And that's fucked up. But also, if you see them as actual people, you should give them some respect as well and what they might want in this situation. They have been victimized at the hands of this government that we are trying to take down, these beings. Do you think that they wouldn't want to be used that way to help dismantle the system that put them here? I think that they would be very down with that. And that would be what actually matters to them in all of this. They deserve the chance. And I really liked that being, the whole perspective here. It just made a lot of sense to me in a way that I hadn't really considered. And it is a different, Ed not wanting to use it for themselves and getting their bodies back. He feels like we suffer the consequences of what we did because we made the choice to do it. They don't deserve to get used up to fix our mistake. But this is a bigger proposition. It's more than about them. And yeah, I have to assume these creatures would be very happy with being used this way. So he drops it in Al's hand. And Al is like, okay, we're about to do this. And this all is happening inside the onion because there have been a series of explosions. Well, there's the one explosion, then there's a series of moments where it is falling apart and it creates this enormous dust cloud. And so Kimberly and Pride are outside looking at this opening, waiting for something to happen, because there's so much dust in the air they can't see anything. And Kimberly asks Pride, do you want me to just get rid of it? I can swipe it away. And Pride says no, they're in there somewhere, completely trapped, and Al doesn't even have his legs, so how could they possibly escape? And just as he says this, there's the red crackling light of alchemy that is fueled with the Philosopher's Stone. And then we see Ed coming out of the cloud of dust, and he has got new legs. And the two of them are watching him they're like surprised, but they don't really seem alarmed at all. And as they step out, Kimberly is just like, oh, good. Well done. He's not exactly running, but he seems to have been able to put himself back together. And the episode ends with Al stepping out, looking at Kimberly, and there just being like a moment of eye to eye, we're about to fight. And then it just ends. I was really surprised that that's the spot where they cut off. And it cuts to the end credits, which look different. And for quite a while, it's just what I think is Ed, like looking out over the city with his hair blowing behind him and his collar open in the most romance novel type pose. Like, it's just so over the top, and it felt so out of step with everything that I had seen so far. I burst out laughing. It was just such an odd place to end the episode. And then new end credits with that image, which felt wildly inappropriate to the entire atmosphere that had been set up. I just started cracking up. There's a new end credits and opening credits song now also. I should mention that it just started with this one. And I prefer this opening credit song to the previous one, but I didn't give the end credits song much of a chance, to be honest, because I was fast forwarding through it to double check whether there was a post-credit scene, and there was not. So, but anyway, I just thought that was so funny, because if you showed me that end credit shot, I would assume that this was some sort of like romance that I was about to watch, you know? B. Moore is talking about Armstrong's ability. It hasn't been displayed in full force so far. A running comment in the show has been that all these state alchemists from Ishval are veritable monsters. We got a glimpse of that from Roy when he killed Lust, but their fighting has always been a bit muted. Damien says, yeah, the Ishval alchemists were called up for that for a reason. We just don't get to see it all that often. The Ishval alchemists were called up for that for a reason. I think I'm just reading this too far past something that I said that you're maybe responding to. And B. Moore says that's Hohenheim at the start of the credits, not supposed to be Ed from a romance novel. Oh, so it's Hohenheim like in the past. Why is he the one that's opening the end credits? I just don't like him. That's all it comes down to. But it's Hohenheim from a romance novel then. Damien says the OPs take the subtlety of the other OPs in terms of spoilers and just absolutely chucks it out the window. Never ever watch Rain's cinematic. I don't know what that means. What's Rain's cinematic? They were called up for Ishval. I realize it got worded back. Oh, you're talking about okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the Ishval alchemists. And I was like, wait, but they didn't, what did they get called up for? I got you. B. Moore says, if you watch the rest of the end credits, it makes sense, but please don't do it. Lots of spoiler imagery. Oh yeah, no, I won't. I almost thought, well, I'm so close to the end now. And I saw that it was different end credits. And I was like, oh, well, no, it might have been safe, but it is no longer safe. They've changed it up again. So I'm not going to do that. Oh, Damien says Rain is the song that plays during the opening. Got you. And yeah, I won't watch the opening. I don't understand why they do this, guys. That feels like, honestly, it's not even just thoughtless. It's actively shitty. And I don't understand why. It's not like people are getting drawn to watching a show from opening credits like they're a trailer. Right? Unless that's how they're treated maybe in other countries. But like, I just don't understand the logic behind doing that. It feels... It's one thing to have the little bits that you have like at the beginning of a sitcom, which are clearly short clips a lot of the time from episodes that have already been recorded, but they're not spoilery clips. They're just like moments of somebody turning from the kitchen counter laughing, you know? To choose to do stuff that's like, oh, by the way, the fucking Fuhrer is a homunculus. Why would you do that? It's just really inconsiderate. Yeah, and Damien says the manga had just ended at this point and most people watching had devoured the manga's ending, but like that's just, you're setting this up to only appeal to the crowd that already, it just feels like you're cutting yourself off at the knees, like Al did, LOL, in a way that I don't think is beneficial to anybody. Even if you've read the manga, wouldn't you want to know if things happen the way they do in the manga as you're watching the show? Wouldn't that be part of the fun? Is like sitting and seeing if it goes the way you're thinking it's going to go, instead of it being all shown to you. Yes, we are going to do the thing that you probably still remember from the other thing. That's no fun either. I just find it to be a bad choice, and it's super annoying to me that so many of these animes do it. I can't watch the credits for One Piece either, you know? Although maybe now with the Bon Voyage I might be able to, but I just don't like it. But anyway, I am really interested to see where this goes, because like we leave Ed and company getting surrounded by these creatures and locking themselves in that room and begin fighting, and we don't see anything like how it goes. And if they can't be killed, I don't know what kind of effect they're going to have or what they're going to be able to do. The only thing that I could picture is Ed maybe somehow building a wall using alchemy to separate them out and make it so that they can exit the room and the rest of these dummies stay stuck in there and aren't released. And I'm not really sure what they're capable of. Could they break through a wall just by like continually pounding themselves against it? I don't even know, you know? So I'm just really, I don't think straight up fighting is going to be the thing that saves the day down there, but also I don't really have a good idea how else this could go. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap this up. But thank you guys again for hanging out. And thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you a lot. Hope y'all have been enjoying the coverage. And I'll be seeing you on Friday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.